Hello everyone, this is Soviet Bear, and today is my regular guest Joaquin Flores is joining me right now. So hi Joaquin. So our subject today is the upcoming presidential election in the U.S. and the presidential candidates and Donald Trump, Hillary Clinton, Ted Cruz, Bernie Sanders. We're going to discuss them all. So please let us start with Bernie Sanders, because many people say that some people say, especially people like Alex Jones and American conservatives, say that he's a communist and he will make America communist. But I don't know, I don't think so, because actually he positions himself as a democratic socialist. So who he really is?
He's a American liberal, and I think that people who are kind of more on the socialist end of the spectrum, they're divided about him because they don't think he's socialist enough or communist enough, and or they don't have any expectation that he would be, right? But yeah, there is that you know thing with Bernie Sanders where people are either reading him for really not for what he is. I mean, his supporters, some of them are taking a kind of pragmatic approach, and some of his supporters are like more radical than he is. They think that you got to push the agenda and stages and whatever. But then, his critics from people to his right would say, which is like some percentage of people, not a small amount, would say that he's too much of a socialist. But it's thing is that the word socialism is really defined in a weird way in the United States. It's like in America, it's like defined really funny. So it's almost pointless to have. It's almost a pointless conversation because you're going to argue with people about what words mean, then you're not arguing the ideas. You can't agree on a taxonomy, right? You don't have a lexicon to work from. So if there's not a discourse that can be had that like people can understand each other's words, then it's pointless, right?
Yeah.
Because socialism means something like it's like football and soccer has its own definition of soccer, football, and socialism. Okay, it's like one of those things. So you go to Europe, Latin America, whatever, and they pretty much know socialism is is not like means that big government, or doesn't mean like higher taxes or bigger government per se. It's a different definition. It's
Yeah,
complex.
but I have
Yeah, it
seen
involves
Alex.
different.
Yeah, but I have seen Alex Jones and his supporters actually lambasting Bernie Sanders, and Alex Jones said that Sanders is going to make the same system in America like it is in China and all that stuff. I don't know. I don't know. I should laugh or I should cry when I hear such things from such big fish as Alex Jones.
Yeah, I mean, thing is, a lot of Alex Jones' talking points kind of mirror the old John Birch Society stuff, or what was it, Liberty Group, something like that. Definitely John Bircher's stuff. It was an American adaptation of Nazi theory, of Nazi conspirology involving communism. But it's they Alex Jones is real hit and miss. So he explains some things he's right about, other things he's wrong about. I don't know how much he is the source of his own information or whatever, But yeah, I mean, the thing is, so to say definitively like Bernie Sanders is or is not a socialist, it's like, again, that's like, what is socialism? So people say, well, if you think the fire department or the library or the police department or the IRS mean socialism, then it's just you're using some different framework, like understanding of the world that's would be very hard to explain human history through those terms, in my opinion, because nation state is like a relatively recent construct, but governments to vote, how one would define the word government, would be difficult. And so, there's a word for government called government. It's not the word is socialism. So just because there's like a government doing something, or it's a government agency, if the government is providing a good or a service, that doesn't mean that it's socialism. So that's the thing. It's just, I know I haven't said what it is, but I can tell you that is the main why Europeans and Americans, or Latin Americans and Americans, can't speak the same language when they talk about Bernie Sanders. So, yeah, he says he's a social democrat, and he didn't even say he's a socialist. So that's the other thing too.
Yeah, so many people also say, well, especially the on anti-SJW camp, that Bernie Sanders is actually an SJW candidate. So what can you say about that? Is Bernie Sanders really an SJW candidate? And is he a feminist candidate?
You know what? Yeah, I mean, in a way, they're not really responding to SJWs or to, they've been like following this kind of agenda for a long time. This is like, goes back to the 70s and really emerges in the 80s as like a significant voting concept, voting demographic. I think that younger women prefer Sanders over Clinton. So that makes him more like the SJW candidate than Clinton.
Yeah, well,
But
also,
that doesn't mean that he's not like strictly speaking like looking for their support or something like that. He's just but see, American politics is very complicated and has a lot of layers to it, and that doesn't always fit, or that isn't always compatible with people's desire for things to be like explained easily.
yeah, well, as I can see, well, Sanders said that he actually supports Obama's foreign policy. I mean, Obama's policy towards Russia, and Sanders said that he's going to, protect Eastern Europe from so-called Russian aggressions by using
Right.
NATO. Well, I don't see Sanders as a Russophile. I think he's a Russophobe. Do you agree or
You know
not?
what? Ain't no one is going to be president of the United States who's not on board with the American agenda. So it's just not just like anyone can run for president, and they're going to say, so he's had to like, the fact that he's not like really overtly demonized in the press is evidence that he's not a threat. I mean, he is a system candidate. All the candidates are, except for Trump, are system candidates. But I'm not saying that Trump has good intentions or anything like that. See, for me, it's not important these what their own policy statements are. What matters to me is what kind of coalition they will be able to put into action, right? So I don't think that Trump is going to be able to put a lot of this empire building stuff into action. I just don't think that he can do it domestically. If you look at world wars, it's always a Democrat party that's the party in office when you need a big war, and that's because you have to connect social movements and organized labor to the Democrat Party, to the war, right? Because if you're just going to have like the openly pro-austerity party or the overtly even, austerity 2.0 party or whatever, you're going to have like the neocons. If it's going to be like these people that the liberal media demonizes, like all these neocons, if you're going to have them doing stuff, so while making no attempt to lie about it, in terms of not if it's an existential threat or not, but about that it somehow is going to improve conditions for people at home. So the Democrat Party really kind of steps in and makes the war more popular, right? So you don't like you can look at Obama, you can look at Bush, and you can look at the wars, and the wars didn't go away under Obama, and it increased into Libya and Syria. The U.S. was basically ejected from Iraq, though not entirely, but in part. I don't. That wasn't like a policy decision. That was being on the losing end. You know that was the case because you can look at the character of the government there now, even though it doesn't have full control over the country, and there's they have instability, they have a lot of car bombings and kidnappings and stuff, but still basically the government now in Iraq is not pro-American. So really Americans got pushed out in a lot of ways. They still have that giant base there though. So the Republican Party doesn't have legitimacy to carry forward these wars because of so much sort of left of center social movement stuff developed this association with Bush and the wars and Republicans and neocons and the wars. So there was not really a single anti-war march when Obama was president, right? So that's like, and they can kind of troll the public and they can lie about social, whatever progress they're claiming they're going to make. They can lie about it and that they don't deliver on it. People keep hoping, so they vote. Yeah, I mean that's the general trajectory of it. That's why I think that if Trump were president, it would make it difficult for them to wage a war.
Yes. So, Hillary Clinton. Well, many people say that Hillary Clinton has a lot of chances to become the first U.S. female president. So, as I can see, well, Clinton wants to keep things as they are in foreign policy. I don't know about
Yeah, right.
domestic policy. Maybe you can tell me about what Hillary Clinton could do in the domestic policy, because in foreign policy, she's still going to say that Russia is number one enemy, and the Western media are still going to demonize Russia in in very insane way, and sometimes their allegations and accusations against Russia sound pretty ridiculous, and any school kid with even a tiny bit of logic in his head can debunk them. But anyway, so what does Hillary promise for ordinary American?
I will be honest with you. I haven't been following the campaign stuff. It's really just at this stage because they're everything's going to change anyway, so it's not important to pay attention to really unless you're looking at who their base of support is. So at this stage, when it's
Well,
basically the party nominations, they're not. Can you hear me? Are we cool? Are we
yeah,
cool?
yeah, we're cool, but
Okay.
I don't know who is Hillary's base of support.
Like her base of support are um, basically trying to go after basically Bill Clinton's base of support, and so it's a catch-all big tent type of party building that is behind Clinton's support. So you got a lot of different interests, local, regional in the United States. But she's definitely on the same page with like the pharmaceutical companies, and you look at her list of her big donors, and that's also who she's on the same page with. In terms of like the ideology of voters, it tends to be older Democrats. So younger Democrats actually like Sanders more, and older Democrats like Clinton. No one really likes Hillary Clinton. They just think that she's pragmatic and effective, and they don't like her. It's almost like a candidate that's been forced on people. It's it's a very strange phenomenon, the Clinton thing. It certainly is top down. It's being imposed. She has, like, among professionals age 50 to 65, maybe slightly more women than men in that category, people who were connected to IT and the .com stuff, and maybe people who got rich in the 90s when Clinton was president, and people who definitely follow the American line on human rights imperialism, like human rights as a legal justification to enter into foreign complex, foreign wars. So that's a voting bloc. Organized labor. Again, she's not popular really among rank and file, but it's what the union will endorse, and then they'll try to mobilize their members to vote. And they might get such and such percentage of their members to vote with them, but they'll be in charge of mobilizing their membership to do, like, the precinct campaigns for the get out the vote in the swing states especially. And she doesn't really inspire people, so it's difficult for her. She's seen, it's only the power of being seen as the winner that attracts that people who just are either drawn to winning, or they want the win. They want to have the person most close to their own views who can win. And if it's going to be like Trump, that's been, in my view, inserted by Clinton to polarize this race, to push voters to actually vote for between Trump and Hillary. Hillary thinks that people will vote for Hillary. So that's what's up, really, with Hillary's base of support. So, any position that she takes right now is going to change once she's the nominee, and then she's in the race against Trump, and then she's going to have different positions. It's always, always, always how it works every election. So, yeah.
So, well, let's talk about this. This man looks like a little weasel, Ted Cruz, who actually lambasted Vladimir Putin and called him a KGB thug. So, what are his chances?
Who you talking about? Rubio? Cruz?
Cruz.
Cruz? Yeah. I don't think that they inspire anybody. I mean, it's there's really a lot of interesting people in the United States, and a lot of them have political views, but it's the establishment is really just a turnoff to people who are interesting. You get just really weird fucking people drawn to electoral politics in the U.S. and why they want to run, what they're trying to do, and all that. People have weird motivations, and then a lot of them are really, really naive people in college, and then they get a job in a campaign, and then they like it, and then become part of a member of a staff, and they learn how to do the scientific electioneering, and they work on the get out the vote, and they network and make the connections. And during this process, it doesn't always dawn on them that they've become highly corrupt. That it's all about building these basically everything is quid pro quo. You give me money, and once I'm in office, I'll make sure that this construction deal gets done, and you're going to be the first company. You get the first bid on it, and we're going to have not competitive bidding, or whatever. So it's very corrupt, and so people get very jaded, and so it's not surprising that the system cannot generate interesting candidates, and then. But then you enter like Donald Trump, who's like a really interesting person, and he doesn't believe anything that he says. Everything, he's just fucking blowhard, right? He's just so full of shit. But people like him for sort of intuitive reasons. But he's also quite skilled in the neuro-linguistic programming stuff, and so he's an effective communicator. Like Obama, but he has a different tone. And you'll hear certain weird phrases that Trump makes, and he's constantly reasserting his position, his class, his hierarchical position, as he sees himself in the world or whatever, in a position of authority. And he constantly points that out, and that's like his leaderliness. For example, when he was just the other week in Nevada, I think outside of Las Vegas, right? And they're asking him about his good turnout, and he had a big, whatever group of people there, and he goes, yes, this has been fantastic. They've never seen anything this big. This is the biggest thing they've ever seen, or something like that. And he didn't say this is the biggest thing we've ever seen. He's this is the most exciting thing for them. And that's sort of like, he's definitely talking about the people. There's condescension there, but people groove on that, it's honest type of condescension. And he really represents America. I mean, he really is the type of president that America should elect, because he represents all that shit. Any American who thinks that America is like really about something else has been fucking deluding themselves the whole time. Now, so, and that's just my opinion. I mean, I'm not saying that there's like not different interpretations about history, or if a woulda, coulda, shoulda, things would have happened differently kind of thing. But the reality that exists today is certainly, come on, you can't get behind it, right? So,
yeah. So okay, if we talked a lot about them already, about him already, so yeah, right now I'm going to ask you about undoubtedly the most popular candidate of all parties. I mean, for the everyday American people. Okay, so let's talk about Donald Trump. Yes, that man who promised to deport all Mexicans, and and who well why am I attracted, to Donald Trump's rhetoric and to what he says? Because he says he's actually for cooperation with Russia, for peaceful coexistence. And many people have on the internet and some in real life say that Putin and Trump can prevent World War III. So, what do you think about this? Donald Trump and Russia and Putin, what do you think about this? Donald Trump and Russia and Putin.
I think that he made these kind of like statements trying to triangulate on different sectors of support in the Republican Party. You've got like paleo conservatives and isolationists and stuff like that, and you've got the Ron Paul people, and you've got the constitutionalists, and then you've got the kind of like conservatives who like Putin in America. It's like an internet phenomenon, and it's but he doesn't really believe these. He doesn't really believe these things. He doesn't really think. There's no reason for. I evaluate the man. And look at his history. He's saying things that he thinks are going to be popular to be said. He's like being strategic in his statements. He's definitely going after certain segments of the Republican, voting base who, in a sense, like we talked about Clinton and her big tent, catch-all approach. Well, that's how you do party politics in the U.S. because we don't have like 4 or 5 or 6 different parties, only 2 parties. So you necessarily have you get strange coalitions that wouldn't otherwise work in another environment, like in Germany or France or something, right? So Trump deporting Mexicans, none of that means anything. Nobody wants that, Mexicans
This is
as a
ridiculous.
category. There are no Democrats or Republicans who want to deport Mexicans. I'm saying in the party leadership, it's a divisive issue among the people. There's a lot of historical stuff to consider, and there's different ways of interpreting morality and law of these questions. It's not, America is very unique from other countries because you know, there are many different people using different, you know, rubrics or different matrices could be considered indigenous to the land. There's many different theories, so and they're all used in a mixed way around the world. Every so and they're accepted academically and narratively. So you know, Native Americans and Mexicans and Anglo-American, European Americans under different, you know, methods could all be considered indigenous or have a sort of blood and soil connection, you know, to the land and be connected to their self-determination as a people or whatever. So, you know, but as a policy point, no, you know, everyone in the elite establishment supports migration from Mexico because the United States doesn't have a social really net in the first place, and it's very hard for people who without social security numbers or who have fake social security numbers that connect to people who are deceased who have different addresses or whatever to like even receive tax returns or anything like that, let alone a lot of public benefits. And the United States is not a public benefit rich country. It's probably the lowest ranking in the world of industrialized countries in terms of that. So there's really just a cheap labor pool that Mexicans provide. It's not a drain in terms of the profitability for corporations. It's a you know, positive sum that they're running there because they get cheaper labor and not only that, many Mexicans are willing to work for a little bit less, but just having more people is gonna distort you know, whatever previous equilibrium had existed between supply and demand of labor. You see, so you have supply and demand of labor. So if the supply of labor goes up, well, then the cost of it goes down. So you're going to see a general decrease in wages. Countering argument is that, well, of course, then you have to organize all workers into syndicates, right? So that you can then have collective bargaining. On the other hand, history proves that building multiracial worker syndicates is the most difficult to maintain and to build, and is easiest for the state to divide because it's easy to exploit racism and cultural differences. In the United States, for example, in the syndicates, there's, you know, the whites and the Mexicans and the blacks, and you know, some locals, it's a bitter conflict, right? Over leadership of the union, and people think, you know, even the workers in America in the unions think along racial and tribal terms. Oftentimes, it's just a normal part of consciousness to think in racial, tribal terms. It seems, or at least how we're socialized that way. But those are the facts that we're operating with. No one's been able to change those things. There's been no educational social engineering program that has really like completely eliminated people's tribal thinking. So the ruling class likes immigration. It really disrupts attempts to build cohesion among the working class. And there's just a certain part of the population that's like predisposed to xenophobia, and it's like psychological. There's like some facts involved, there's some analysis involved, but people are also primarily emotional. You know, we can say 2 + 2 is 4, but when we explain why that's important to know, and we become emotional, subjective, and that's how people really operate. So there's so many emotions at play with the immigration question. It's easy to manipulate people around that, right? My view is that people who are worried about immigration for different reasons, you know, should have different arguments. But the United States is in a unique situation because of its own history. It would it's impossible, it's delusional to like advocate for a border policy for the U.S. that's going to do anything other than just serve the interests of the ruling elite. I mean, you can put up a border wall, and they're just going to use the wall to keep Americans in, or they're going to use the wall, to make the wall people shut up about fucking building a wall already. It's just not going to, but when it comes time for a company that needs surplus labor or agricultural, Americans will work for like 10 or 15 bucks an hour, but they're not going to work for $5 an hour or $7 an hour. And that's what a lot of these people are trying to pay. You see people from Mexico, Guatemala, El Salvador. But then you get a lot of people on the left who just have they have an ideology which dictates that the people are supposed to fulfill some task. So they're like looking to the people as like being like this messiah that's going to come fucking save the future against the past and some class struggle as the motor force of history. So then they like see, people who, as a sociological phenomenon, you can say that they're people, migrant people, but all these people are like individuals with stories, and their ambitions are individual in character, and they may not respond to this ideology of collective organizing. Unless in Mexico they were, unless they had some formative experiences, which happened, or they came from a particular political environment in Mexico. They're just like coming to work and stuff, and the fact that they may be undermining like some other person's bargaining power for a better wage is like, you don't say like, oh, I'm not going to go apply to a job because then I'm increasing the number of people applying. No, you're like looking to get a job.
Yeah.
You're right. I mean, so, and they're just human beings, and they should not be, demonized or villainized. They're not the source of any decline of American culture or civilization in anyone's wildest imaginations. On the other hand, they shouldn't be, condescended upon in a prejudicial way where you're making them some kind of, noble beasts, that they're like these, altruistic animals that, I respect. The thing is, I just respect people so much that I know that they're capable of being assholes. You see what I'm saying? It's like, I don't see people as meek. I see people as being empowered.
Yes.
You see, I see people as being empowered either as individuals, and then the only empowered individuals can come and make effective groups without becoming slaves.
Yes.
But I do believe that people come together and make a difference even bigger than as individuals. I do believe that. I've seen that. But at the same time, you can't see the people that you're trying to build something with as being some victims, and you're there to fucking save them, like some Christ complex. You see, no, it's crazy. It's a big thing on the left, and so instead of understanding that people just have different experiences from you and they just see the world differently, many people from the left who were educated in the official universities and institutions like that, or have these institutionally approved references, maybe they read like Chomsky or something, and then they see the underclass or the working class as they're just uneducated. They just don't know what's in their own best interest. And this kind of condescension, like workers and people inherently feel from the liberal left of center or left wing intelligentsia. They really feel that. And in America lately, there's been more successful populist overtures coming from non-mainstream Republicans. So they don't have a good economic platform or anything like that, but they're just this concept of the people has been lost from the left, and they started focusing like on different in groups of people, students of color or transgendered women, or kids being bullied online, or any kind of weird category. So instead of the idea of like the people or the masses or something really popular, and so that has been the obstacle in understanding the trajectory of American politics. Why it is that Donald Trump is a billionaire Republican conservative but he comes onto the scene like he's the bad boy rebel, even though America itself, as like an edifice, more represents his own historic race, class, interest, or whatever. I mean, it's the white man's country, so to speak, built by, you know, billionaires like himself, and yet today, because the institution has gotten caught up in its own lies so much that you can get someone who actually reflects the very same paradigm that he's now, rhetorically critiquing. It's great theater. It's great demagoguery, because he knows pretty damn well that the system is not like the system that he's attacking. He's attacking. See, people are cynical because they can see that the system that they're being told that they live in is not the system that they live in. But then the justifications that they're being told that make the laws just are the things that they're pushing back against. And ever since pretty much, the Clintons, there's been a lot of cynicism about that in people. They really, after 8 years of Reagan and 4 years of Bush, people thought that Bill Clinton was going to reverse a lot of these things, that Reagan did, and it never happened. So, but the thing is that the Hillary Clinton supporters are among the most hard-headed, non-learners of history that you would ever encounter. So, Trump supporters is like a way different demographic than Hillary supporters.
Yeah.
The real point is that Hillary thinks that she can beat Trump.
Yeah. Окей. Пошла отсюда. Блин.
Yeah, my cat was doing some fucking shit over here. I had to.
Yeah. Okay.
I don't know. Did you pause it or you reconfigure it or something? You got.
Okay. So, well, Donald Trump is actually well, well, well.
I mean, the title of your video is Trump versus Clinton. Who will win?
Well,
on this subject, right? And so that's why people are watching this. So we've been in this now for like, I don't know, 3 hours, and I don't think that we really hit that. So let me just say that the whole game plan for Hillary Clinton is to run against Donald Trump, because just like a fucking fat people wear black and look smaller or some shit, like Hillary Clinton thinks that she's going to look like a better human being in contrast to Donald Trump. And if they can just create this Donald Trump as Hitler fucking concept, then they can say, oh, well, anyone is better than Hitler, or they, even Strasser is better than Hitler. And so then, that's what they want to get you to vote for Strasser or something. And say that he's like some kind of Hitler figure, that he's reflective of growing fascism in America. That's really the interesting subject to me. I would want to make a separate short video really to dig into this bogus fear about fascism.
Well, it is the SJWs and feminist women who are comparing Donald Trump to Adolf Hitler, and it is really for me it is hilarious, because the man is literally Satan to those SJWs, professionally offended, political correct people. And it's really funny for me, because I don't know how does it feel to be professionally offended all of your life.
Right, of course. Right. I mean, it's also to have the luxury of being able to take umbrage all the time. It, really also speaks of the class, the upper middling, lower upper whatever class these people are, descend from, descending upon us to share their revelations and their enlightenment with us, poor, unwashed, unruly masses. And that's really the rub of the SJW thing. It's That's a whole can of worms right there, brother. But I mean, you get these SJWs, um, leading online juntas and shit, little cliques, and it's a very funny phenomenon to see, but it's really those Salon and Cracked and Huffington Post and all of these that are actually very mainstream. And a lot of these SJWs, they think that they're radicals, but all their entire ideology is pro-system. It's pro-system all the way. And I'm not saying that it's anti-system, but in the final analysis it's pro-system. No, I'm actually saying that the leading theorists, they just think that what's wrong with society is, that there's some racism and patriarchy.
Yeah, and those SJW love to repeat that they are the oppressed and they are, and they are fighting the oppressors. But if you look at it, if you can understand the bigger picture, those who are claiming they are oppressed, they are actually the most privileged.
The thing is that for poor white people, and let's face it, we're all kind of poor in
Mm,
this world.
yeah,
But for poor white people in America, the fact that they're poor is going to have a much more significant outcome. Is going to be a much more significant factor in the outcome of their life when compared to other white people than their whiteness. And if you select for race on that, it's much better to be born as a middle class white or a middle class black than it is to be born as a lower working class black or working class white. So I think that the class subject is more important
then the race
um,
subject.
than the race subject. I mean, the reality of race as a subject has as much weight as people breathe into it. That's so of course it's an important factor because it has been reified into an important factor. But substantively, class is a more significant factor, and but class is a subject that is taboo to address in the United States, and much of the feminist discourse actually is, a classist discourse, and it's not classist in terms of it is an elitist classist discourse is what I mean to say. So um, they're going to polarize this election to make Donald Trump into being, Adolf Hitler, and then people who have been very strong sort of left-wing critics of Obama and are going to end up falling into the lesser evilism in American politics, and they're going to end up voting for Hillary Clinton by thinking that Trump
The lesser evil.
is lesser evil, because in America it doesn't matter what you're capable of, and it doesn't matter what you have done already. It matters what you say. You see, that's the thing. Because
Well,
if you look at what you have done, Hillary Clinton is the serial killer. Literally, that's not hyperbole. She's a serial killer.
well, for sure,
Uh,
for sure.
and I'm not saying, and that's directly. I mean, this is coming out of the real estate scandals, Arkansas politics, Whitewater. There's a trail of dead bodies everywhere that the Clintons have been in their lives. And then on foreign policy, the things that she's responsible for, she's like a, Madeleine Albright in terms of, on the Hitler scale, she ranks, Madeleine Albright. That's above Hitler. So, it's like that. That's the reality. No one should go vote thinking they're gonna make some difference voting. I mean, I've only said vote for sheriffs and things like that, because then when the people are confronting the state, the sheriff can deputize all the people on the spot, and then you're a legally armed foreign posse that's like a militia under the democratic and local control of the sheriff, deputized by him or her through those authorities vested in the people. And that's or if you live in a smaller town or suburb and you get involved in city council and school district politics, you can also have an impact on your direct lives in a way and the lives of your children. But in terms of federal politics, that game is closed off, and there's no play in that game. And people who vote and they don't, and if you were to ask them, they were to answer honestly, intellectually, honestly, they would say, I don't believe in the system. But at that moment that they vote, they're investing psychologically, and they have these reservations, and they're holding on to these delusions on a certain level, you know.
Yeah. So, okay. So, one more question. So, as a Russian person, in terms of Russia-USA bilateral relations,
Mhm.
what, which candidate is better for the Russia-USA bilateral relations? I mean, the facade, you know. When I say facade, I mean the diplomacy.
Oh, you know what? Yeah, well, remember it was Clinton who tried to when Hillary Clinton's first term as Secretary of State, or her term at the beginning, the first year of her term as Secretary of State, she had that reset button. Remember that reset with relations, and she give was it
Yeah,
Lavrov or
and it was a
yeah
mistake in the in the Russian writings of the word reset. Instead of reset, перезагрузка, they wrote перегрузка, which is actually means overload.
fucking idiots.
So instead of a reset, it's overload.
Yeah, well, it was an overload. That's hilarious. That's great. Wow, I had no idea that adds a dimension of stupidity to the whole thing. They fucking even got the word wrong, and they embarrassed themselves in front of the Russian group and in the international media. How retarded, of course.
Yeah.
But yeah, the reset. So that was, I mean, so the whole game with Russia has been this like ongoing reset, 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 reset. There was like that's always the shit every few years now. But Clinton or Trump, in terms of Russia, again, it has nothing to do with these people's commitments. It has nothing to do with these people's ideologies. It just has to do with the social forces in American life and in the international arena that they can unite. And the Europeans, um, Europe is even though you have Christian or I should say center right liberal Democrat Christian Democrat parties, who want to reform the state expenditure system. They're still far more the voters in general are far more social democratic than they are liberal democratic, and they're meaning they're more left wing than they are right wing on the economic issues in Europe and in most of Europe, and Europe doesn't really understand Europeans don't really understand the United States, but they do like to follow American elections very much, and they do participate in this American thing of feeling good or bad about yourself based upon which American political candidate you support. And that's why Europeans continued to like Obama like for longer and for much more than Americans who had actually voted for Obama themselves, began to lose support, their liking of Obama. And Europeans were still vibing off of, Obama the candidate, while Americans were living under, Obama the president. And it was totally irrational. And likewise, Europeans have this reaction to Trump. It would be, for Trump to successfully lead an American coalition into a major conflict with Russia, would require an alliance with organized labor that's very difficult to pull off through the Republican Party, as we described at the top of your hour, in the history of the Democrat Party and major wars, World War I, World War II, Vietnam, Yugoslavia, etc. All the major wars, European wars, wars that could potentially be major, that will involve a huge American commitment, it can involve conflict between the major powers, is Democrat Party war. So all things being considered, then that's why I believe Trump is the better candidate for American diplomacy and peace in the world. There are no European candidates who will be able to form a kind of coalition of the willing or a NATO alliance around some project that's going to have Trump associated with it. So,
Yeah, and well, as Russians view Obama differently, from the Europeans. For us, Obama is, first of all, he doesn't deserve his Nobel Peace Prize. Well, that's what we Russians think, and he doesn't deserve his Nobel Peace Prize, and he disappointed many of us Russians with his policy and with his aggressive rhetoric towards Russia and his policies in Syria and Ukraine.
right.
Many of us thought that Obama can actually make a change, that he is more peaceful, but as we have learned, the lesson from Obama's 2 terms is that none of the American presidents can be actually trusted. They are all the same essentially.
They're all the same essentially, right? So that's the deal with it. Look, um, the Americans just have to understand that they're in a time when they've reached a corridor where political change from within the country or through a reform process is just not possible. And it's just going to be right now, the emerging international community is adjusting the United States, they're right-sizing the United States um, to match the reality, which is American, loss of significance and power in the world. And I think that other countries are helping the United States not to collapse. They're helping the United States to kind of have a glider landing, on the runway instead of a crash, and they can just kind of ease on in and restructure their economy. Take the world off the dollar as the world reserve currency and introduce other currencies and kind of relocalize the dollar as an American currency and that has a normal place in a basket of currencies in world reserve currency. And then America also might have to do some of the things that China has done, which is like industrialize using latest technology, labor-saving technology, robots and stuff. Americans I project that the internet has increased political awareness
It sure
in many
did.
ways, and I think that it has done things that have two different, multiple processes can go on at once and that are not contradictory. They may seem to be at first, but they're not. For example, people are more in contact with people from all over the world, but at the same time, the very same technology actually raises awareness about the effectiveness of locality in politics and raises the effectiveness of local politics. So it's a strange phenomenon because it has those different dimensions to it, and that would seem to mean that really federal power in the United States should devolve, and that the United States will start to have increasingly different character in different parts of the country, so that like federal regulations would decrease. And at first there would be some kind of race to the bottom among states that were more market-oriented or liberal, but other states could engage in politics of nationalization. So you could have you could have different economic policies in different states. Some states that are more natural resource driven might do better with planned economy features being more heavily, emphasized, and technological sectors might be more entrepreneurially motivated, whereas medical research, could be either, and so forth. And you could really, I think that America as a liberal country could get in touch with its, and I mean liberal in the European, in the Enlightenment sense rather, could get in touch with its own history and practice experiments in living. So you don't have a one-size-fits-all solution. Originally each of the 13 colonies on the East Coast were their own states, and they had their own laws and their own customs and stuff. And the Constitution, federal law, was it was a framing document, but it was played the back seat in most of the life of a person, either as a citizen or as an economic unit in the state. And I don't think that history goes backwards; it only goes forward. I don't think you're not going to return to the 18th century. The means of production and technology has evolved. It won't, the hardware has changed, so that software can't run on that hardware anymore. But we need a new software to run on the hardware that's developed. The infrastructure, the new means of production, make possible different types of economic forms. That's not what's being contemplated in this election at all. I mean, what are really the things that inspire people to get involved in politics right now is, besides these wars and ending these wars, is all the scientific research that's been kiboshed, it's been silenced and stuff. People who've developed engines. I'm not talking about free energy, but definitely lower cost energy, forms of energy that solar energy. So these there are some major obstacles to be still overcome in the institution and the investment required, but the payoffs and the dividends would be long term over time. And things like intellectual property, 3D printing, reliable food sources, things like that. I think that people are moving already in this paradigm, are transcending into a post-class type of society, because their interactions with people, which is your social being, has been virtualized, and people are able to then have different identities or virtual identities and see themselves, in a digital way, and that identity then explodes the normal sort of normalizing tendencies of everyday life, where you're connected to your trade or your particular class or your walk of life. And so I think a lot of people are interested. They would love to be able to keep the internet, but then go off grid and just have a power source and stuff like that, and catch and grow their own food, and spend half their day or 3 hours a day doing that, and then not working, not paying taxes, or any of that. So that is an experiment that I'm saying should be promoted. And for the United States, the real solution is to allow everyone in every different part of the country to gravitate and move towards each other and build their own experiments that they see fit, right? For example, whatever you want. You can have the tranny part of America, and you can have the white only people. And I don't know why black people would want to live with the white only people, but there'll also be the white and black people who like to live together. They'll have that too. And there'll be the black people who also don't want to live with anyone else but black people, and they should be able to do that, and it shouldn't be on some reservation or some place with no resources. All the things that happen with America that's wrong, happen wrong to so many people, white people along class terms, and also ethnic terms later on, as the things got postmodern and weird and stuff like that. But Native Americans, Mexicans, black people, chattel slaves, all that stuff, none of that stuff's really been resolved. But when you look at the trillions of dollars that have gone through these just QE1, QE2, QE Unlimited, all of that stuff, there should be no really conservative American, regardless of color, but let's assume this what the social justice warriors think is the prototypical, Anglo-white, white Anglo-Saxon Protestant male conservative, cisgendered, whatever, heteronormative guy, and let's say he's got $500,000 in the bank, so he's whatever, not impoverished, I suppose, and make him like the prototype of evil. But America never overcame any of that stuff. And you could say, okay, let's paint that guy up. Even that guy wouldn't oppose reparations for slavery. I mean, that should, and welfare and institutions that made you better cogs or better, industrialized slaves in the machine, or public schools that indoctrinated you to become slaves in the machine are not reparations, or welfare to like live hand to mouth in some landlord of questionable moral, ethical values is taking your rents that you're getting. Basically the state was not subsidizing people, subsidizing landlords, you see. And reparations for black people, there's no reason why anyone should oppose that. Like, not the money, first of all, could be backed by gold and be real money, and even that money would be there for that. I mean, the thing is that the productive capacity of the world is far more tremendous than we see, because of all of these practices like planned obsolescence and mismanagement of resources and unnecessary conflicts. These people who are running things are very intelligent in terms of their strategy, but they're very, sort of amygdala in their understanding of what's at stake here, right? They're just in fight and, feeding. They're operating on their 4Fs, and that's not, a sustainable vision for humanity. But yeah, that's what it boils down to. So, sometimes people when my own political views or writings often get misconstrued or misunderstood, because I am friends with people who are communists. I'm friends with people who are anarchists. I'm friends with people who are like white militia, whatever, constitutionalists and rednecks in America. And I can,
And
I have a different method of evaluating and judging people. That's mine. Okay, it's my business. I actually try to evaluate people on a different basis. If they're honest, if they're well-intentioned, if they're not bigoted in terms of like, are they open-minded? Do they listen to ideas? Are they interested in the world? Do they see themselves as people who are growing, or who already know everything there already is to know? And I'm interested in connecting with all the different, whatever, human beings, all these fucking different souls, points of lights, whatever, who are converging on a similar, if I can use the term, like wavelength, who are interested in pushing these boundaries. And they might be people who come from like conservative Catholic backgrounds, and they might see themselves as Catholics, neo-traditionalists, monarchists. I don't really care. We live in exciting times, and it's pointless to talk about what could have happened, but we can talk about what will happen and what should happen.
yeah,
So,
Joaquin,
when,
are there
yeah.
are there actually monarchies in America? America, which
No, not in a, no, no. I mean, not in a serious way. Only in the sense that the Queen of England is not questioned as like, the United States is part of the cult of They promote the the British monarchy as a benign, even positive force in the world.
because I
So I
know
mean,
there are many monarchists actually here in Russia who are, not, I would not say nostalgic, but who think that the Russian Empire and the Romanov monarchy was pretty awesome. They think that the Romanov monarchy was better than the Soviet Union and better than the Russian Federation and all that stuff.
yeah, I mean, I'll leave that for the Russians to sort out, but I believe the Russians have already sorted that out. I
Yeah.
mean, the monarchists get to have like kind of their say through the exaltation of the Orthodox Church, which is, I think, the more important part of Russian cultural history than the monarchy. And the Romanov dynasty in particular could be considered like usurpers, first of all. Secondly, they opposed the old believers, and they pushed forward through all the reforms of the Orthodox Church, which are connected to even some of its present day practices that are questionable. And the view on church and state, the monarchism in Russia is connected, is tied up with the church because of the
Yeah.
Caesaropapism, of course. But
Yes. Yes.
I just thing is that how does that resonate for people? I know how people think. I've met so many people, and people were, people like watch these movies like, that are set in the 19th century. It's beautiful, like snow and the horse riding through the snow and the lanterns and all those like period movies, and guys have like mustaches and top hats and
Yeah.
collars, and everyone looks so dignified. And I understand it's like romantic, and we're like drawn to our perception, our projection of a simpler time. But people were dying of fucking cholera and typhoid, and people had worms and shit, and
Yeah.
people were in other ways things were better. They didn't have like cameras all over them. They didn't have like crocodile and crack and AIDS,
Yeah.
and they didn't have mind control. Certainly back then it was easy to rob a bank and get away with it and just ride off into the sunset with $1 million and become a pirate and buy a boat and travel the seas and shit. Yeah, in other words, it's a trade-off, but there's no going back, and you're not gonna like put the monarchy in, and then what are you gonna do? Shut the fucking internet down, or what are you gonna do, like Saudi Arabia or something? I mean, but like I always tell people, that's for Russians to sort out. Those are just sort of like my comical reflections. But if Russians like in mass decided they want a king, let them have their king, right? It's up for Russians to decide, But I just as a history buff, I'm more of a Stalin man myself. But what can I say? I don't think that the last Romanov certainly didn't have an interest in politics or government. I mean, he just wanted to live like a sort of. He was actually had subscriptions to Western European middle class lifestyle magazines, and he used to like read them, and he kind of like wanted whatever was like the precursor to having like a suburban house with a white picket fence and 2 cars in the garage. That's kind of like what he wanted. To that in the West, what he wanted. And he didn't like really want to be the czar and do all that stuff. And so I mean, I don't know why I understand the theory of monarchism. I don't know why the whatever existing like Romanov legitimists or whoever today like are promoting the Romanovs. I mean, they kind of they abdicated, right? Mm-hmm. So, I mean, he abdicated to his brother, and then his brother, was executed, or?
Well, his brother also abdicated.
Yeah, so when you abdicate, you're out of the fucking, let me just explain to you how it works in the world of kings and queens and shit. I mean, but people don't always know. You're the captain of the boat, and you go down with the boat. You're the king of the castle, and you go down with the castle. If you surrender, then you surrendered your line's right. So you can wage a fight and not accept the results, and they'll execute you. But then your son goes off into hiding, and he can always maintain that he's the prince, the crown prince and king to be. But if you abdicate because you don't want to get killed, then actually you've lost your right to rule.
Yes.
And that is inherited by anyone else in your line. So I don't think the Romanovs actually have a right to rule by the rules of monarchism, right? So, and I don't know. I mean, this is not my field of knowledge, really. I'm just, that's my understanding of it, though. Right? I mean.
Okay, and in fact, Romanovs were executed by the Bolsheviks. So,
yes.
But anyway, let's get back to America. One more thing, and then we will wrap this up.
Yes.
So, okay, the presidential election, will it bring something new, not only to the Russia-USA relations, but to both domestic issues and foreign issues? I mean, something that will make better for the people in the U.S. Or is there life?
Will anything good result from the elections? Will anything good result from the elections, you're saying?
Yes, yes.
No. I think that elections in America just only breed delusions. I don't think there's anything to be learned from exposing. I don't think there's any like pedagogical, political, educational process that can take place in the elections by through participate or have believing it. Um, Trump is not a fascist. Trump is not anything worse than Hillary Clinton at all on any issue that even the left is concerned about. So it's really nothing is at stake. It's really just foreign policy that's going to be a difference. Hillary will be more hawkish than than uh,
Trump.
than Trump. Yeah, yeah, and not because of what they think. It's just because, like we said, the social forces behind them and what kind of coalitions they can build. It's really that simple. It's actually because Hillary Clinton will be a more effective uh, coalition builder for a war, right? So that's a fact. Um,
Well, I hope the global war will never happen.
yeah. Well,
I still believe
I
that.
you know I hope it doesn't. I hope it doesn't. I don't really hope for shit. Yeah, I mean, I can tell you why. I can tell you why or why not it will or won't happen,
Well,
or why it didn't happen or did.
well, I
But
hope. I
believe.
just hope. I just believe there will be no global war. Maybe just in Russian nature to hope to believe in something. But anyway, I believe that our diplomats can talk it over and the nukes will not fly. Well, even though you can see a lot of military videos and weapons demonstration on my channel, I still believe the war will not happen. I mean, the global war. This is the paradox of the Russians. We do not want war, but when it comes to war, when somebody invades our motherland, we are very, very good at kicking people's ass. It is a paradox, but it is a Russian reality.
Yeah, it's also very difficult to win a land war in Eurasia against the people who are invaded and have nothing to lose, and who are if the invaders are executing people, then you've given people no reason to surrender.
Yeah.
So, and you're on a land war in Eurasia. It's a giant landmass and supply lines
Yes.
very easy to get cut.
Yes,
And
the invaders, especially the invaders from the West and from the US, will have a very very tough logistical problems. But this is a land war in Eurasia. What about a sea war in the Atlantic or in the Pacific?
I think that sea war is very bad right now. I don't think technologies favor use of navies right now. I think that the equilibrium is favors small boats that are cheap to produce, can take out very big boats.
Yes, and that's why our naval command produces more and more corvettes rather than frigates or destroyers.
Yeah, I mean water fighting will become more land fighting and less like the old navies of giant boats and stuff, but it'll be more like you know corvettes and even like jet skis, and it'll be more like um, platoon operations and things like that involving special operations, securing ports. But yeah, I mean, because it's very easy to now, even with a handheld thing, you can launch something from a boat and you can put a big hole in the side of a giant boat and it's done for.
Or inside of an aircraft carrier. Well, there is actually Russian command and Russian naval command said that they will pay more and more attention to the unmanned underwater drones.
Thing is that American imperialism as an Atlanticist power, as a sea power, has
Yeah.
of course relied upon the power of the Navy this whole time, going back to when it was Britain and the British Navy and the American Navy. Is infamous too. That people don't always know about. It has, of course, a big history. in the wars, the Spanish American Wars in the Caribbean and in the Philippines, and lots of craziness with the American Navy in history. And but technology's changed. It's like I don't know, not an analogy for people who aren't Americans, but it's kind of like in baseball, in college baseball when they introduced aluminum bats, and it completely changed uh, people's stats, and it's like a different game. And the offensive, when in baseball, when people are younger, it's like it's a batter's game. It's, pitchers are slower than the kid's skill to bat. So it's you get a lot of runs, and people have high batting averages, right? And then you go on, when you get older, pitchers get better, and so in war it's similar because there are different technologies, and some favor like a defensive game, some favor an offensive game, some favor ground campaign, some favor an air campaign. Right now, warfare there are favors defensive powers over offensive powers, and it favors everyone deployed on the ground over everyone deployed anywhere else. So the ground is the most important thing, more than air, because you have even like well-equipped S-300s and you have enough of them, you can handle air stuff. S-400s, really forget about it. If you have enough of those, then you've neutralized the Air Force. And if you have an Air Force running sorties as anti-fighter fighters over your own skies, where you don't have to worry about the enemy's anti-airs, and you've got the defensive shield from your own anti-air, then forget about it. And so as long as you're like moving your defensive line, so again, the ground campaign is more important because you're moving the line of where SAMs can be located. So everything is a ground campaign, and I think that smaller vehicles and lightly more rapid movement groups are more important than tanks, except for tanks that have like reactive armor, and I think in the Ukraine conflict there hasn't been any T-90s that have been neutralized yet, and because of its reactive systems are very advanced. But
T-90s have been
normally,
also deployed in Syria, and none of the T-90s have been neutralized in Syria because Russian reactive armor have been proved to be very good counter for the TOW missiles.
right. So it's again uh, that is a game changer. But excuse me,
Okay.
generally conforms to the trend. But yeah, it's a good time right now for countries that modernized their military, who invested in their military as a key to their sovereignty. It's good time for that. You look at like Iraq and the sanctions that they had to agree to, and that their loss of anti-air meant that they had bad anti-air in the first place, meant that they were going to lose the conflict with the U.S. It was already predetermined. I mean, the resistance won, but in terms of they, losing the Iraqi state, they lost the state. It took like 10 years to have a state again, really.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, and now Iraq isn't in a good condition, and nobody really knows that how Iraq is going to end up. Will it, preserve its statehood?
right, right.
Well, Iraq is well. Well, I think that in the worst case scenario, Russia can intervene also in Iraq to help Iraq to fight ISIS and other radicals come. There is a possibility of this.
Mm-hmm.
Well, well, the world policed by Russia and China is a subject for a separate video. So I think our
Yes.
next video should be Russia and China as world superpowers.
Right.
Well, if the US falls, there is going to be a vacuum of power, and somebody's got to fill that vacuum. So I think there is going to be a subject for our next video, but right now I think we should wrap it up.
Great.
Okay.